Climate change in Minnesota. So I was asked to talk a little bit about climate change, and I'm really big on history, of course, historical trends. What has happened in our area in the past? And it does tie into climate change, and I'm going to see if I could just... Oh, so this first picture, anybody remember the thunder blizzard from last April? We've already had blizzards since then. This is the McDonald's in Maplewood. And what was interesting about this blizzard is pretty much everything shut down about an hour after this picture was taken, including McDonald's. It was closed. So everything closed, which was interesting. It's just, everybody just kind of, that's it. The blizzard took over. So what I'm talking about today, some items to bear in mind. Our climate story differs from little parts for the U.S. and world. What we're seeing in Minnesota is a little bit different than other places in the country and the world. Observations and projections are different. You're going to hear about projections from folks. I have a little bit of that, but I focus a lot on what has already happened. You never know, I might use Watson data. Frank Watson. Welcome, Frank. His dad, Bruce Watson, longtime climatologist for Minnesota, so friend of the office. And thanks, Frank. I'm glad you're here.
I was at the other meeting at first.
Huh?
I was at the other meeting at first.
So was I. So, look at the crowd. So we have variability in trends. So they don't disprove each other. Just because we have one cold day doesn't mean all the days are going to be cold. Although it seems like our winters, the last couple have been pretty cold. So the important part is seek more information, refresh frequently because the things are changing. So what are we seeing in general? So wetter, no surprise. Everybody in this room knows we've been wetter. We're seeing more precipitation, believe it or not. That also means more snow, more frequent and larger extremes. We've observed this already in the state, projected to continue with wet and dry variability. I'm still waiting for the dry. Been a while. Warmer, especially at night during the winter and when it's generally cold. We just don't get as cold as we used to. Even in our cold winters that we've seen in recent years, we just haven't been that cold. This is June 2014. If you're familiar with the Cub Foods off Rice Street and County Road B, it was underwater in June 2014, and they did all they could to pump that water out this year. We had, if you were down that area, they had it kind of blocked off. They never really did close it this year, but it's been a struggle to keep this road open because we were wet again this year too. So we've been wet the last quite a few years now around here. The data I'm using are based on backyard rain gauges across the state. They look just like this, little tin cans. They haven't changed in over 100 years. This happens to be the observer down in Harmony. I went down there to inspect the station because they have now the state record precipitation, over 50 inches, and they're approaching 50 inches again this year. So 2 years in a row, 50 inches of precip for the whole year. Luckily, we don't have quite that bad up here. So we've been keeping track of precipitation by decade. This is the Minnesota River area. Over the years, it's been going up ever since the Dust Bowl. Lakes even around Ramsey County dried up in the Dust Bowl. But ever since then, we've had periodic wet regimes, and especially the 2010s. We've seen the wettest since we've been able to collect records from those tin can rain gauges. Looking at the whole state, this is January through November. Anybody can look this up. It's called Climate at a Glance. You can Google it, make as many graphs as you want. Couple things that stand out on this is our general trend upward for precipitation. I think I'd circle. What's missing are dry years. Here's in the early 2000s, about 2002, about 2006, we had a couple drier years. What's really missing, 1976 and 1910. Anything really dry. And here's our 88 drought. Some people might remember that. Drought was the last real serious drought. And if you're in about 2012, we had a dry spell too. We've had very few of these lately. They've all been up here in the last few years. So this is this year, so we're approaching one of the wettest years on record. I think it's not quite in the books yet that Minnesota will have the wettest year on record, but it's getting close. We have to see how December pans out for sure, but January through November, it's the wettest since 1895, since we've been able to keep track. Twin Cities, focus it in a little more on this area. This is Minneapolis, St. Paul, going back to 1895 again. year over year of above the long-term average, or this is the normal. The normal we take is 30 years. Right now it's 1981 through 2010. So this is the 30-year normal that you'll see on TV when they compare. Multiple years now well above normal, and this year is the wettest year we've seen in the Twin Cities, and that's even going back to 1870. What else are we seeing? We took all those rain gauge readers that have long records in the state, and this is a census of 1-inch precipitation days by year at 39 of those best stations. And over time, we've been seeing an increase in 1 inch, which would be, about, fairly rare. You have about one every other year, or one every year at your site, maybe even a couple a year. And when they used to be fairly uncommon, over time, these 1 inch rains are getting more common, and we've seen this with 2 and 3 and 4 inch rains too. They follow the same pattern. So the heaviest rain we see in the state over time has been increasing and getting larger, but also more variable. Some years we don't have a big rain in the states, and then other years we have events that are over 10 inches of rain. So the flood up in Duluth area, what year was that? Oh, I should know. So we've had some big events in the last 10 years, and they really start to spike quite a bit, and we just don't have the same caliber like in the old days, the beginning of the record, not as many big events. I did try to look, okay, what's the worst event I could find in this watershed? We've been keeping track of flash floods since 1970. That's when we started our high-density precipitation network. People have plastic 4-inch rain gauges, and we have 1,500 of them in the state. So we've been keeping track every year since 1970. This is the biggest one. So this is the flash flood from June 30 through July 1st, 1978. Believe it or not, this is the biggest one I could find since 1970. And as flash flood goes, this is not a very big flash flood. But in our area, believe it or not, as wet as it's been, we've been missed a lot on the big rain events. We just haven't seen in the Northeast Metro a lot of events. We usually make a map if it's 6 inches or more for 24 hours. And this is hit that. Here's Vadnais Heights right there. And it was about 6.7 inches. So what did that do, this event, back in 1978? Well, here is Interstate 694 in Lexington Bridge in Shoreview. Obviously, there's no cars going through there. And it said, a man waves through 4 to 5 feet of water. But it can't be 4 to 5 feet where he's wading, because you can see his knees, so unless he's super tall. And one watershed over, the Ramsey-Washington Watershed District includes Lake Jarvis. They flooded out. And something that's kind of interesting in this is this comment here. You probably can't read it. I'll try to read it to you. But houses built during the last 5 years on low-lying areas near Lake Jarvis appear to be bearing the brunt of the high water. This is from the county engineer who said this. We've been developing marginal land, and it's hurting us now. We've taken away areas that used to hold water. So, this is 1978, Lake Jarvis. Lake Jarvis had its record high level. And there hasn't been anything even close to this since 1978. It's the next closest one I could find was 1997, was 2 feet lower than this. And then I went backwards in time, as far back as I could go. For Lake Jarvis, got a lot of records because the county's been keeping records at lake level a long time. Nothing even close. 1942 is a big high water mark. There was flood in White Bear Lake in 1942. Even that doesn't come close to this. So what this tells me is we might want to be careful in the future if we have a big rain event, because I don't think we've seen it. So this is 1978, it's the worst we got. This closed County Road B2 coming out of around Jarvis. And this is the beach at Jarvis here, where there's no beach, and then the picnic tables out in the water. So, that's something that could happen. What helps us out is this big network of rain gauge readers. We have 1,500 readers, and Ramsey County is the best covered of the bunch. And White Eagle over at Ramsey SWCD is the sponsor, and Frank's dad went door to door looking for rain gauge readers. Bruce would go, would you like to be a rain gauge reader? So he was a huge part of starting this network back in the day. So if anybody wants to be a rain gauge reader, I can certainly find a way to sign you up. They're always looking for more readers. So what can I do with this data? I could make great maps that look like this. We have a website with lots and lots of maps. A lot of interest, of course, in rain this year. Various landlocked lakes are having problems all over the state. So this is a precipitation departure from January 1st through October 31st, and it shows how much above normal the departures are. I mean, it's 15 inches in some places and even higher. The worst is in southern Minnesota. So we have waterlogged soils going into freeze up here. So what's the projections? Looking at the National Climate Assessment, the Midwest chapter, looks like a continued increase, and those 2 percentile rainfall events, 1.5 to 2 inches. So with the modeling, shows an increase over time. That's the projection. So it looks like probably still staying wet. Winter precipitation. I don't know about if you have to roof rake your house, but I've noticed I've had to roof rake my house a lot more than I used to. Luckily, I have somebody to help me now. So we record winter precipitation too, and we've seen a change of that too. So liquid precipitation is increasing during winter. Over time, we've seen an increase. So this is a graph showing, this is in Duluth, where they get a lot more snow than we get here. November through March days with the precip below 32 over time has been increasing. So we're getting more liquid. And if you look at the Twin Cities, we're in the same boat. This is snowfall by decade in days with 4 inches or more. We're seeing an increase that, especially last year we had a whole slew of snow events of 4 inches or more. So just because it's getting warmer, we also are seeing more snow. The catch is our snow depth is decreasing. So we're getting more snow, it's just not staying around like it used to. So where it really snows a lot, like up in Duluth, they're seeing a decrease over time with days with snow cover. So 6 inches of snow cover, 12 inches of snow cover. Here in the Twin Cities, you get 12 inches of snow cover. That's a real winter to me, once you get 12 inches. And you count how many days you get that in the Twin Cities. We just don't see as much 12 inches snow cover like we used to. Although this winter we might get it. One thing that happens in any climate scenario is we're going to have variability. So this is the last winter. I was standing at the St. Paul campus there on January 17th. I thought the winter was over. Really did. I guess it's over. And then February happened last year, or this year, still this year, we got 39 inches of snow. We got as much winter as you could pack into what was left of winter. So things can change quickly. So heat extremes, talk a little bit about that too. This is Memorial Day on May 28th, 2018, where we had warmest Memorial Day. So we've seen some heat extremes, not necessarily on the hot end like this, but what we're seeing over time is a change per decade of becoming warmer, especially in the winter. So winter is warming faster than the summer. In the summer, we're not seeing much of a change at all for summer highs. But in the winter, overnight temperature minimums, we've seen a change. Who used to plug in their car at night? I did. I wouldn't buy a truck if I couldn't plug it in. Now you don't really have to. I'd plug in my truck if it got down to 20 below. And how often does it get to 20 below anymore? Let's see. So Minnesota average winter temperatures. This is showing the average for the winter for the whole state, and in general it's going up. Our averages are increasing. We have a few below, a couple of recent winters, but you thought these last couple winters were really cold. They're not even close to what they used to be. I mean, you don't have to go too far back where it was pretty common to be much colder than it is now. One thing I like, we have many more kind of mild winters in recent years. And seeing something that mild was rare, now is pretty much common. So one thing I like to do is compare, you always hear about the heat island in the Twin Cities. Well, it's hard to compare the heat island because it's, there wasn't much of a heat island maybe in the 19th century as there's now. So I compare downtown Twin Cities and the airport to St. Cloud, where it's pretty rural. So this is a plot of the coldest winter temperature every year in St. Cloud and the Twin Cities. So in St. Cloud, you used to get down to minus 40 on a fairly regular basis. You get to minus 40 in the Twin Cities, you get to minus 30 on a fairly regular basis. But in the last 40 years or so, we don't get to minus 30 here. St. Cloud doesn't get to minus 40 much anymore either. So very few winters are like that. And that's an important number to have. If you want to kill off pests, you have to get cold in the winter. Emerald ash borer, is that a problem here? Yes, if we got cold enough, it wouldn't be. There's another one that I even hate more, is these guys. Yes, Japanese beetle. If you have a garden, you don't like Japanese beetle. Now, they go in the soil, and they eat your grass too, by the way, eat the roots. But the lethal temperature is 15 degrees, and they'll die when the soil temperatures are 32 degrees or colder for 2 months. Now, last winter, we had a good die-off. Japanese beetles weren't that bad this year because we had that open cover, and it got cold in mid-January, so we had a perfect situation to kill a few of these things. This winter, unfortunately, the ground isn't that cold because now we got snow. It's going to insulate the ground, so it's probably not going to get as cold. So they probably be back, unfortunately, for that. So this is on Keller Lake. Took a picture of them and eating Virginia creeper, and they eat a lot of other things too. So just for a special case, I love looking at lakes in our area. I look at White Bear Lake all the time. I was waiting for the water to start going out of White Bear Lake in April, so I always said, I did a talk like this 10 years ago in White Bear Township, I think, and I said I will be standing in the outlet of White Bear Lake again because that's part of our climate. It will go up. Lakes always go up. It'll get wet again, and of course I got a picture of me standing in the outlet in April. And it's still flowing out of White Bear Lake today, so it's still going up. But Birch Lake is kind of a neat lake. The H.M. Romali, my sister married into the Romali family, so I hear of the historical Romali Pavilion, and the cool old buildings in White Bear Lake. Birch Lake's an interesting one because there's a long record of Birch Lake. And I came across this study that was done by the Vadnais Lake Area Water Management Organization back in 2007, 2008 by Blue Water Science, and they have a great quote in here. Fluctuation in the lake is expected, and if history proves correct, Birch Lake levels will once again rise to its historical average. And you're like, what are they talking about? This is what they're talking about. That study was done right here. So, if you have a year over year of fairly dry conditions, they can add up over time, and you wind up your lake's going down. And of course, it goes the other way too. You have year over year of wet conditions. Now we're way up here. These graphs are kind of fascinating because you can kind of pick out some of the big rain events too. But just because the lake's down one time doesn't mean it can't come back. And if we get a drought again, it'll go back down there. We'll be back again. But I wish I could tell you when. Yep. And here are we at now, up high, and this is actually through like May. I don't have the current levels. So I don't know if does anybody know Birch Lake? Is it even higher? I'm guessing it is, but I don't know. So that leads into what can cities do to support data collection efforts? So it's good to have a history of what has happened. So the more data you have on a lake, precipitation, temperature, lake level, groundwater monitoring, all those are really critical to understand what has happened if you want to understand what will happen. Use existing tools. One of my favorites is NOAA 14. Engineers love that because they use that for design criteria for the 100-year storm you might have heard of. So that's good. And there's tools anybody can just go on the web now, Climate at a Glance. And we have a new tool called Climate Trends tool. This is through the DNR. What's nice about this tool is you can choose data by watershed. So you can go back in time over 100 years now, and you can do the whole state. You can do watershed. You can do many choices. So, you know, not too long ago, you had to log into a special website and you had to know what you're doing to really dig out any data. It's getting easier and easier now, too. So with that, if anybody's got any questions on climate, weather, wish I could tell you what spring will be. We're worried about spring because all the lakes are high, and if we have precip on top of the lakes in the winter, they're usually places like White Bear Lake, they'll bump up in the spring. So if we get, let's say we get 4 inches of water this winter, so now you're going to have 4 inches of water going to all your lakes. So that'd be a fairly typical total. On the high end, 1965, 6 inches of water, 8 inches of water. On the low end, you know, we could have a drought, go into a snow drought. So lots of things could happen. So.
It seems like, to me anyway, that a lot more storms seem to pass south of the metro
Yes.
than they used to, you know, both winter and summer. Is that, do that?
I went to a convention, the Soil Water Conservation District convention. I worked the trade show. I get a guy every year come up to me and goes, all the storms missed my house. He's in Nicollet County, or, you know, and I'm like, you know, if you like the weather, the more you like the weather, the more you think they're missing you, because you see them, there's more there than here, so they always seem to miss. But you're right, the flooding events we've had, Egan has been hit a lot more than we have. We just, up here, we haven't been hit by many of the, even the 87 storm, it just kind of nicked us up here.
Is that because they got more precipitation, or they just didn't do good city planning to deal with flash floods?
Oh, in Egan?
Yeah. It's kind of a more recent suburb.
Yes. Yes, they had problems with those little ponds. You know, they go in another pond and another pond, so they've had some trouble with those down there. But it's also just a luck thing too. It's no, I wouldn't say Egan's wetter than we are here. Just, you know, we haven't have any that magnitude of rain here yet, but someday we'll get it. I don't know. You never know when. So.
Any other questions?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep.